From inside a radio booth at Highmark Stadium in Buffalo, New York, it is the Banner Ravens podcast. Paul Mancano and Jonas Shaffer, who just bumped into the table, which bumped into our webcam and is now giving everyone a skewed view, which I will fix in just a moment. But Jonas, we are here to recap the Ravens' 27-25 deflating, devastating loss to the Buffalo Bills in the divisional round of the playoffs. We're going to touch on what this means for Lamar Jackson's legacy. We're going to touch on everything that went wrong for the Ravens in this game on offense, on defense, and of course, the game that was perhaps most nightmarish for tight end Mark Andrews. But first, Banner Ravens podcast is brought to you by Toyota. Toyota has been building a legacy of excellence for years. From developing hybrid technology to upping the standards of safety and efficiency, Toyota is always innovating, always making progress. And with a superior lineup of in-stock SUVs, including the adventure-ready RAV4 and capable, affordable Corolla Cross, you can experience the legacy of Toyota for yourself. Visit buyatoyota.com, the official website for deals, to find out more.
Don't miss the 2025 CIAA Men's and Women's Basketball Tournament in Baltimore, February 25th to March 1st at CFG Bank Arena. Watch HBCU teams battle to be crowned champion. Check out the free fan fest and performances at the Baltimore Convention Center. Enjoy downtown's top restaurants and stay in one of our amazing hotels. The CIAA Men's and Women's Basketball Tournament. You want to be here.
All right, Jonas, I've somewhat fixed the camera. We kind of kicked the camera in the same way that the Ravens kind of kicked themselves after this devastating loss to the Buffalo Bills here in Buffalo, New York, as they fall to a team that they were favored against. They fall for the second year in a row after winning just one playoff game. And feels like we're having the same kind of conversation that we had at this point last year. This was a team that won 12 regular season games, could very well have the MVP in Lamar Jackson, could have, a guy who is going to get some kind of down ballot MVP votes in Derrick Henry, had a phenomenal defensive turnaround, and yet they came up short in a playoff game where they hurt themselves more than the opponent hurt them.
This was, I think, how you would draw it up if you were Buffalo. You invite some chaos with the weather, with how often you blitz Lamar, with this crowd noise. I mean, it's a silly hypothetical to say the Ravens would have been better off playing at M&T Bank Stadium, but I think it's safe to say that they would have preferred to have the home field advantage. And, maybe that 10, 20 degree difference would have been enough, would have been the deciding factor between Lamar being able to grip a ball as he's trying to avoid a sack by Damar Hamlin and him giving it up as he's trying to make something happen. Von Miller takes it back, sets themselves up for a touchdown in a game that was just decided around the margins. Mark Andrews tries to make a play and it turns into a disaster. The Ravens find Andrews again in the end zone on a 2-point conversion. And if you want to quibble, you could say that it should have been a little bit higher, but that's a catch that every tight end in the NFL is expected to make. You look at the penalties. It wasn't really a problem for the Ravens tonight, but I think they finished with about 30, 35 more yards of penalty yardage than did the Bills. And one of those was a crucial and pretty bad seeming pass interference call on Tre'Davious White that, again, led to a Bills touchdown. So, there was some optimism, I think, from the Ravens coming into this year that even with everything that they lost in the offseason, from personnel to coaching to just straight up vibes, that this team could have surpassed what last year's did because of the fires that they've been through, because of who they were bringing back, because of just the continuity. And here they are again. We're 7 years into the Lamar Jackson experience. I don't think tonight was as bad as his detractors will color it as, but 3 MVPs, we're guessing, in about 2 weeks' time when the NFL honors come out, and he'll have 1 AFC Championship game appearance. And Josh Allen will now have 2. It's become the Patrick Mahomes Invitational. He's made it every single season that he's been a starter in Kansas City. It's tough to reconcile everything that we've seen from Lamar when so much of what he's measured by is what he does in January and in early February. And I feel for him. I mean, he was very emotional after the game. He was cursing. He's not a guy who typically drops a lot of profanities, but he was pissed off. He was pissed off about how it ended. He was pissed off about the turnovers. He was pissed off just in general. And you could tell that he was really emotional in the locker room afterward. And your heart breaks for him, because if it weren't for this or that, I think we would probably be talking about the Ravens going back to Arrowhead Stadium, and given that week one, loss, another shot at revenge.
How does a team like this, that is so talented, that is well coached, that had all the momentum seemingly from the outside 2 years in a row, make the same back-breaking, self-defeating mistakes? And that's our word of the day, is self-defeating. The definition: serving to frustrate, thwart, etc. One's own interests or intentions. First known usage, I have no idea. You actually go ahead.
What I think our colleague Calgoon pretty much lays it out in black and white detail. The Ravens have given up 15 total turnovers in their 6 playoff losses since 2018. In that same time frame, their opponents have given up 2. Their last 2 playoff losses against Kansas City and Buffalo have a combined 6-0 turnover margin against the Ravens. And they just, this one felt a lot like the Steelers game in week 11, didn't it? From the turnovers to the crowd noise to Lamar doing uncharacteristic things, from the ground game taking a little while to get going, the defense being a little bit more vulnerable than we expected it to be. I mean, the Ravens outgained Buffalo, I think, pretty significantly, but they just did not have a whole lot of answers in the red zone until late, when they made that incredible stop. Darius Washington, of all players, sticking his nose in there for a 1-yard loss and giving the Ravens just a stay of execution. But man, I mean, it's a long walk from here to the preseason to the regular season. And I wrote a story this week about Lamar Jackson and his uncanny parallels to Peyton Manning, both 2-time MVPs, both dealing with the big bad wolf in their AFC. For Peyton, it was Tom Brady. For Lamar, it's Patrick Mahomes, and now Josh Allen as well, which is even more daunting to get over. And he's going to now have, we think, as many MVPs as he does playoff wins, because he's now 3-5, I believe, in the playoffs overall. And of course, it doesn't include the wild card round games that they've skipped over by virtue of finishing as the 1 seed in 2019 and again in 2023. But listen, I mean, it's three seasons in the past 5 years, where they've, maybe 6 years since 2019, where they've arguably had the best team in the regular season. They finished number 1 DVOA in 2019. They finished number 1 in DVOA last year. They finished number 1 this year, despite all of the clusterfucks with their defense. And yet here they are with not even a chance to win a Super Bowl title on Super Bowl Sunday.
How does it happen? How does it keep happening? I mean, you mentioned it feeling like the Steelers game back in week 11. It felt like the loss to the Bengals, where Tyler Huntley fumbles at the goal line. It felt like where Zay Flowers fumbles at the goal line. Mark Andrews dropping that pass on what would have been a game-tying 2-point conversion, and a nightmare day for him. It felt like deja vu so many times. And it's 9 months until the regular season starts up again. It's another 12 months before we get any kind of answer to the questions that we're going to be asking and the outsiders are going to be asking, which is, how does this team get over the hump? What's different about this year's team from last year? What's changed? How do you guys allow the playoff losses to fuel you? What have you learned from these playoff losses that are going to help you going forward? It's going to be the same questions until they answer them. And year after year, no matter how many bites of the apple they seem to get, they don't allow themselves to finally push through. And it's incredibly frustrating for fans that watch this team dominate during the regular season and go on this month, 7-month journey. It's a 12-month journey. The NFL is a 12-month season now. And to have it come up short again in ways that, were marginal. Like you said, Jonas, here and there, the plays being made. If Mark Andrews doesn't fumble, if Mark Andrews catches that ball in the end zone, if Lamar doesn't fumble, if Lamar doesn't throw that interception, we're talking about, like you said, the Ravens having a chance to face the Chiefs again.
I mean, so much of what makes Lamar great is just this athletic arrogance, and that is not derogatory in any sense. It's athletic arrogance that I think is what lets Patrick Mahomes try a 10 to 15 yard pass as he's about to fly through the air on a touchdown pass to Travis Kelce. It's what makes Josh Allen think he can run over a defensive tackle in the A gap because he himself is 6'5", 240. But it just feels like in some of the worst possible spots, some of that athletic arrogance has just led to the worst possible results. I mean, just tonight alone, you break down the interceptions and other pivotal plays. I think you could probably argue that Damar Hamlin is a well below average athlete for a safety. He was not even a part of that Bills run when he nearly died because he wasn't a good enough player to even get on the field. And here he is starting for Buffalo.
Yeah.
And I think when Lamar saw him on the play where he fumbles, he's like, this guy's Damar Hamlin. I'm Lamar fucking Jackson. I can run by him.
Mm-hmm.
And he can't. And he tries to grip the ball and he loses it. And Von Miller goes off in the other direction. He has made that sail concept, that corner throw to Lamar Jack, to Rashad Bateman, to Isaiah Likely so many times. I mean, think of how many just touchdowns Lamar's thrown on that kind of angle route to the sideline, which is what Rashad Bateman looked like he was running on that interception. And he overthrows it. Maybe, you blame the weather, maybe you blame the tight coverage, but it wasn't really all that close. And Lamar missed so few throws in this game, and it was just bad luck that was one of them. And then even, when you think back to their wasted opportunities in the red zone, the Ravens get the ball first and goal from the 2. Derrick Henry stuffed for a 1 yard loss. They call a pass play, which I think fans will certainly quibble with, considering just how insistent fans were that they run the ball unforgivingly because of what they had done in week 4 and also what happened last year against Kansas City. It's a play action pass. Lamar thinks he can get out of trouble. He can't. Nothing happens on third down, and they have to settle for a field goal. And here they are losing a game by the slimmest of margins, where if they'd converted, the 2-point conversion where Matt Milano bats it down and Isaiah Likely is wide open. Number 2, convert the pass to Mark Andrews where he's wide open. Or 3, just throw that thing away and give yourself the opportunity to make, even if you don't get it on third and goal from the 3, maybe you get a 2-yard run and you have Derrick Henry in the backfield ready to take this thing home. It's just, it always feels like it happens. And that is that's the blessing and the curse of a game like this with so much variance, is that you can lose a game like this in this kind of crushing fashion, despite Lamar, I think, playing overall a pretty good game, despite the ground game having the kind of success that it did in the second half, despite the defense finally turning up in that second half. And it's just not enough. And we got to do another week of Mahomes versus Allen instead of Lamar versus Mahomes.
Lamar had exactly twice as many passing yards in this game as Josh Allen did. 254 to Josh Allen's 127. His passer rating in this game, Lamar Jackson's was 114. Josh Allen's was 87. The Ravens averaged 5.9 yards per rush. The Bills averaged 4.9 yards per rush. The Ravens had more first downs, more third down conversions, more plays, more total yards, more passing yards, more rushing yards. And it didn't matter because they committed more turnovers. They failed on 2 2-point conversions.
They averaged 7.3 yards per play against the defense that we thought was very, very good. That's more than they averaged during the course of the season.
I really thought, the way that they were moving the ball in the second half, they did not punt in the first half. Did they? How many times did they punt?
I don't think they punted at all.
Did they punt a single time in this game?
They did not.
They did not punt in this game, and they lost. That is mind-boggling.
It boggles the mind.
It boggles the mind.
Looking at the success rate for this game, again, Ravens were 50. Yeah, again, higher success rate, 52% to 49. Anytime you're over like 48, you're doing a really, really good job. It comes down to silly things on the margins. I mean, we talked to Ronnie Stanley after the game, who obviously this might be his last game. This might have been Brant Stevens' last game. This might have been Patrick McCary's last game. And he said it does feel like what has been their bugaboo in earlier losses in the playoffs, even going back as far as 2019 when they have 500 yards of offense against the Tennessee Titans. But there's that early interception off Mark Andrews' hands. And we should probably at some point get into the Mark Andrews of it all. There's a strip sack on a play where Mark Ingram bumps an incoming Titans edge rusher around Ronnie Stanley, and that leads to a strip sack. Titans recover in Ravens territory. Another drive ends prematurely. Titans get free points. It's like a Rube Goldberg machine of the most frustrating ways to lose a game.
Let's talk about Mark Andrews because this was, you could not have scripted a more nightmarish game. He did lead the Ravens in receptions in this game. That's the crazy part. 5 catches for 61 yards, but that's not what people are going to remember from this game. They're going to remember the fumble in the fourth quarter with about 8 minutes left when the Ravens have a chance to come down the field and take the lead. Immediately loses the ball on a play where if he just goes down, the Ravens have a first down and are driving in Bills territory with a chance to take the lead. And then, of course, they're going to remember the dropped pass that you said, Jonas, yes, that ball could have been better thrown by Lamar Jackson. It almost seemed like Lamar had a hard time believing that Mark Andrews was that wide open.
It was a perfect play call.
Perfectly scripted.
They expected man-to-man. They got man-to-man. They ran the little rub route completely uncovered. I mean, if you were to quibble with anything that Mark did before he actually dropped the ball, it was not getting deep enough because he would have had to catch that and then probably reach out over the end zone, over the goal line.
But even if he falls down catching it like he was falling down, if he just rolls back, I mean, there's not a defender near him who can touch him down. He just rolls into the end zone, that ball crosses the goal line.
Yeah, I mean, he has not had a good postseason. It's strange that his best playoff game in his playoff career came without Lamar Jackson. It was that game with Tyler Huntley in Cincinnati where he just kind of took over. But I'm trying to bring up the stats right now. I think coming into today, he was averaging about 40 yards per game in the postseason, which is well down from his normal average.
36 yards per game in the playoffs. Still a goose egg in terms of touchdowns in eight career postseason games.
And that's probably the most shocking part about this, just that Isaiah likely catches a touchdown, but Mark Andrews can't.
Right.
And we should probably the most frustrating part about this is that we wish we had more answers for you guys about what actually happened on the play or how Mark was feeling, but in a bit of a mix-up, I guess is the charitable way to call it. Mark did not talk to reporters after the game.
Yeah.
There's still a chance that we'll hopefully talk to him tomorrow when the Ravens hold their locker room clean out. But, you usually expect guys after a nightmare like that to realize that it is better to kind of face the music, as bad as it might be, and just nip it in the bud, rip off that Band-Aid, get it over with, head into the postseason with, as light a burden as possible. And we are left with just questions for his teammates because we did not get the opportunity to talk to Mark Andrews, or if we did, it was an awfully quick one that the assembled media did not act upon.
And the same way that we have to talk about this bitter end to Lamar Jackson's incredible season, we have to talk about a bitter end to what was a very good season for Mark Andrews. 11 touchdowns. That's a career high. He passed broke the all-time Ravens record for most receiving touchdowns in a career. I mean, it was a season of accolades for him. He started out the season slow. Marlon Humphrey said after the game that Mark was not fully healthy before as the season was starting, and he was battling through that. He played in all 17 games, and it looked like this is finally going to be the time that he breaks through. I mean, this game was so ripe with narratives. You talk about Lamar Jackson, obviously, and Josh Allen being part of the same draft class. Mark Andrews is part of that same draft class. These guys have been through all of this heartbreak together. Lamar hasn't been on the field for every playoff game, obviously, but Mark Andrews has gone through this over and over and over again. And it's at a certain point, like what can you do? It's not Mark Andrews is still going to be out there next year if they are back in this situation again. Lamar Jackson is still going to be out there again. The players simply have to execute. It's not Todd Monken's fault. It's not John Harbaugh's fault that Mark Andrews decided to try to cut a backup field when he already had the first down and fumbles that ball. It's not the coach's fault that Mark Andrews dropped that ball at the goal line. The players simply have to make the plays. And for Mark Andrews now, you're talking about a guy who's entering his walk year now in 2025. That's going to be a large topic of conversation for the next 9 months if they don't get an extension done. Isaiah Likely caught a touchdown today. Probably, if that ball reaches him that was tipped on the 2-point conversion, would have had a 2-point conversion as well. He is also, I believe, entering the final year of his contract. Ravens, I don't know if you can extend 2 highly paid, very talented tight ends, and it might have to come down to a decision between the 2 of them. And Mark Andrews, unfortunately, his playoff career has left a lot of Ravens fans wanting more.
Yeah, that's fair. I think in a strange way, this is probably the I don't want to say the best possible result because John Harbaugh needed this win. We talked about how the pressure was on, that he was at the hostage negotiator crisis of our pressure power rankings, but I don't know what more someone in his position who is not calling the plays, not on offense, not on defense, had this team prepared enough to go out into the maw of this, hostile Bills crowd in the snow and have this team looking as prepared as it did. I mean,
that first drive was gorgeous. It was a thing of beauty.
And if, Brandon Stevens carries Khalil Shakir up on the seam, like he probably should have on that 3rd and 8 on the first Bills drive, then we're probably talking 3 and out, 6 and out for Buffalo, and it's a wildly different game with a wildly different vibe. But John Harbaugh can't hold on to the ball for these guys. John Harbaugh can't miss tackles. He's responsible for coaching them. He's responsible for coaching them. But I think for the most part, aside from a couple high leverage calls that Todd Monken went with that were a little bit questionable, they did what they had to. They got unblocked rushers at Josh Allen. They were able to defend the run well enough in that second half after kind of getting run over. Special teams came through. Justin Tucker made a tough kick. Keaton Mitchell had some solid returns, but it's at the end of the day, John Harbaugh is going to probably be receiving a contract extension in the next couple of months. That's just usually how it goes because he would be entering the final year of his deal. And as we've talked about, Steve Bisciotti, does not want to have lame duck coaches. Yeah. And what this team has done in dominating the AFC North in the Lamar Jackson era speaks for itself. And if you fire John Harbaugh, it would be a very attractive job, but what kind of person would want to step into a situation where, divisional round playoff appearances and AFC championship game appearances in this conference is not enough?
Yeah, it's not enough. Yeah. I mean, anybody that you hire to be a head coach is going to be looking to just make the playoffs in his first year, and that won't be good enough for fans. I mean, they just have to get to the Super Bowl and win it if possible. I mean, that's the kind of pressure that John Harbaugh is under every single season. And by the same token, I don't think that this game was necessarily, like you said, there were some questionable calls that Todd Monken made. The defense had some brutal lapses. Marlon said after the game, Humphrey said that, that at the worst possible times, it felt like they kind of reverted. That Brandon Stevens explosive play that they allowed on 3rd and 8 in the first quarter, that was a rare kind of just total blown coverage at that point. And that's something that we haven't seen since about week 11 or before.
Yeah, I mean, this was an explosive Bills offense, and the longest catch that they had all game was 34 yards. the longest run that they had all game was 17 yards. Now they had a couple that went for 10 plus, which is very out of character for this Ravens defense. I mean, I think the Ravens led the NFL in explosive run rate in terms of being positively evaluated. But just to circle back, Paul, to your point about the incredible nature of this game, the Ravens, as you said, did not have a single punt.
Mm-hmm.
Since 2000, according to True Media, just 6 teams have gone an entire game without a punt. So let's hope that that's accurate. Only one before tonight had ever lost.
That's crazy.
The margins of those games, not really that close. 41-10, 38-31, 48-21, 45-28, 24-17. And then ironically, the 2003 Kansas City Chiefs lost to the Colts. And I guess that would have been a Peyton Manning team, 38-31 in January 2004. So give this Ravens team credit. They sure know how to lose in interesting ways, but it was, I mean, as you can attest to, it was a pretty dejected, resigned locker room afterward.
Yeah, it was. Not only no punts, but no turnovers on downs either, weirdly enough. Just utterly strange. And it's just, it's also upsetting because we had a conversation. I did a video before this, and you wrote about it on the BaltimoreBanner.com, where you can subscribe $1 for 6 months, about Lamar, the narrative that Lamar can't play in the cold and that he struggles in the cold, and how bogus that is, because the stat that you dug up from True Media of the 14 games in which Lamar has played where the temperature is 40 degrees or below at kickoff, he's won 12 of those games. And I know a lot of people said, well, 40 degrees isn't that cold. He just has not had that many opportunities to play in games this cold. He's never played in a game this cold, and he still finished. He had the bad interception, he had the bad fumble, but he still finished 18 of 25, also had 2 touchdowns, sacked just twice, and that quarterback rating of 114 with 254 passing yards. The Ravens have Derek freaking Henry, and they gave him the ball 16 times in this game for 84 yards. He averaged 5.3 yards per carry, also had a touchdown.
Justice Hill
Had
himself a game too.
6 carries for 50 yards. Lamar also had 39 yards on the ground on 6 totes. So this was the team that was supposed to win when it's snowing and freezing cold, and they needed to go to the ground game. And I feel like in a similar way to the way that the Ravens last year against the Chiefs kind of, I don't think that Todd Monken abandoned his game script, but they go down so early, so quickly. I mean, they score that first touchdown just like they did against the Chiefs last year. The Bills respond and tie it up, and then it's the interception and it's the fumble, and all of a sudden the Ravens are in a 21-10 hole at halftime. They finally get back to the running game, but it was like, you need it when you're down by 11 and you're constantly running the ball. You need everything to go right. You can't be committing holding penalties. You can't be backing yourselves up. You can't be having negative rushes. This team is built to play from ahead, and they got down so quickly that it felt like they just couldn't catch up. There was the moment, I mean, that drive before Mark Andrews fumbles, I thought that felt like their best opportunity to come back and take the lead in this game. But this team is supposed to have been built to win in this environment, and they failed.
Yeah, and there were, there will be a lot of attention paid to the turnovers and to the 2-point misses and to some of the defense's shortcomings, but my mind goes back to just some of the plays that happened before the play. There was obviously Derrick Henry getting stuffed on first and goal. That leads to the field goal drive. You have Matt Milano cutting down pass at the goal line when Isaiah Likely is right there. But, right before that Damar Hamlin fumble, which Von Miller brings back, on 1st and 10, the Ravens have just gotten into Bill's field goal territory on the 16-yard, I think, screen pass or the crossing pattern to Anthony Miller. They're at the 28, and Lamar looks for Mark, and Lamar drops it. Like, that was the first indication that, oh boy, this might be a bad Mark Andrews game. And then compounding things after that, we didn't ask Tyler Linderbaum after that Week 18 game, like, how he felt he'd done, but there were some sketchy snaps in that one. And, I don't know how big Tyler's hands are, but if they're proportionate with the rest of his body, they're probably not big for a center. And you wonder, in that cold environment, had the weather affected some of his deliveries to Lamar, because there were definitely some problems right after the snap. And on that one too, Lamar told us after that was an RPO. He can't handle the snap cleanly. He doesn't really have an opportunity to throw it to Isaiah Likely, because the linemen are proceeding as if everything has been processed smoothly, so they're run blocking, and Mark can't throw it to Isaiah once he actually has the ball corralled, because it would be a legal man downfield, and Lord knows the Ravens have had enough illegal man downfield penalties this year. So he tries to make something happen, and it goes from bad to worse, and the Lamar fumble is gonna get all the headlines on that, but that's 2 independent failures by this Ravens team of setting him up for failure. And because Lamar is Lamar, and because he has his postseason record, and because he has, he gets all the money, obviously people are going to hang these failures on him. But as so many people told us post game, like, this is a team loss.
Right.
And my heart breaks for Lamar, because I think he really did have a nice game tonight in a very tough environment.
Yeah.
Had they been able to come out of this with a win, I think, like, the last narrative on Lamar, aside from beating the Chiefs, would have been complete ripped up, torn out, thrown into the cold Orchard Park night. But here we are, stuck on repeat.
Well, we haven't even mentioned Zay Flowers' name yet, because that is a huge part of this game that perhaps we underrated coming into this game when we were previewing it, is the fact that the Ravens were without their Pro Bowl 1,000-yard sophomore wide receiver, who was so phenomenal for the Ravens. And especially, we kind of talked about all season how Zay Flowers would go out and have these incredible first halves and then kind of disappear in the second half. Ravens could have used an incredible first half from Zay Flowers in this game. I mean, think about what he could have been able to do on this field in the cold, making guys miss.
Without the Bills starting safety, or one of them out there. I mean, they juiced up their man coverage rates, the Bills did, because they didn't have a lot of respect for the Ravens receiving core, and we saw that burn them a couple times. I mean, Rashad Bateman, in like the most classic Rashad Bateman game ever, where it's just, oh wow, he's doing something really, really cool early. Where else is he going to show up? When else is he going to show up? He gets the touchdown. He gets the 3 catches, and then he's kind of quiet. And again, nothing against Rashad, because if he was being matched up with Christian Benford, no shame there. Christian Benford, one of the low-key best cornerbacks in the game. But you just look at Lamar's overall production when he was blitzed in man coverage today: 6 for 11 for 74 yards, 0 touchdowns, the 1 interception, and he was sacked twice. When he wasn't blitzed in man coverage, it was it doesn't have it, but he also took another sack. So 2 sacks, both his only 2 sacks came in man coverage. And the Ravens really could have used a little bit more from Nelson Aguilar. They could have used more development from Devontae Walker. I think wide receiver is probably going to have to be a priority, because I think this probably will be the last game of Nelly's career in Baltimore. You just need to get someone younger, get someone a little bit more dynamic. You need to find someone who can block like him. But the Bills tried new levers that they couldn't try in week 4, and they worked in spots, and that was enough to give them the advantage at the end of the day.
Anthony Miller and Steven Sims both had more catches in this game than Nelson Aguilar did. Who would have been nice to have? Deontay Johnson.
Yeah.
Who the blame could be shared amongst a lot of people, Deontay Johnson included. But this was exactly the kind of situation that the Ravens...
Well, he's on the Ravens, Paul.
He is on the Ravens. He is technically on the Ravens. Wasn't allowed to be activated for this game, but he is technically a member of the Baltimore Ravens.
Property of the Baltimore Ravens.
The property. I mean, you're without your number 1 wide receiver. You would like to have somebody who had 350 some receiving yards for the Panthers earlier this season, and nightmare second half for him. Didn't really want to be here, and obviously was not active for this game. So ultimately, you're without Zay Flowers. It hurts you a lot. It's the same kind of conversation as you're playing with a hobbled Mark Andrews last year in the AFC Championship game.
Didn't have enough people who could beat man coverage. Didn't have enough tonight either.
Those are details that are going to be lost and nuances that are going to be lost over time. And it just kind of fades away into Lamar Jackson's failures in the playoffs, and ultimately great players overcome a lot of those. He just hasn't been able to do that. I mean, the offense looked fine last week without Zay Flowers. Not the case today. And at some point, they've got to overcome that. However, you do think that perhaps this team, I don't know, maybe could have used another weapon, could have used more reliable weapons. I don't know. Ultimately, it came down to the players not making plays. I mean, your Pro Bowl tight end dropped a 2-point conversion and had a fumble. I don't know what else Eric DeCosta truly could have done, because this team was about as sound top to bottom, about as deep top to bottom as any team in the NFL. And in a lot of ways, I think they were better top to bottom roster wise than the Bills.
Yeah. I mean, the Pro Bowl appearances speak for themselves. The All-Pro appearances speak for themselves. That was the argument of Bills Mafia, that Lamar, shouldn't be MVP because look how much help he has. And the Bills aren't exactly hurting for talent. They great offensive line. We saw Khalil Shakir have some nice game. James Cook, probably the best running back the Ravens have faced this year. I mean, some of the runs that he was able to pull out of his ass tonight were really impressive. Lamar is, I think, inscrutable in a lot of ways. That's by design. He doesn't let a lot of people in. But what I kind of keep coming back to is just this thing that John Harbaugh told us pretty early in his career, which is like he feels like he has a photographic memory, and that plays out in how he processes coverages, that plays out in how he's able to learn from opponents and then improve when he sees them a second time. We certainly saw that a couple times with the Steelers this year. But, and not to play armchair psychologist, but part of me does wonder whether that fixation or that recall leads to some less than ideal decisions, because you are just such a prisoner of certain moments that you don't have the keys to get out. And do you have enough of that, next play mentality where you're not hung up on your failures and you're more concentrated on what you do well? And it may be, just total BS that I'm spouting here and not knowing enough about sports psychology or Lamar or whatever, but you just wonder if someone who experiences emotions as acutely as Lamar does and who loves football as much as he does that ultimately do him more harm than good in situations like tonight, where one mistake, two mistakes is all it takes to end your season.
What we shouldn't be hearing 6-8 months from now is that the vision for Lamar is to be the best quarterback ever in the history of the NFL, because he did nothing, unfortunately, and it's not entirely his fault, but nothing to further that and to put him any higher in the category, because not only can he not beat Patrick Mahomes now in the playoffs, but he does have a Josh Allen problem.
0-2 now.
So, I mean, we should end up. I do have to hand out the "Who's Got It Better Than" award. Unfortunately, Jonas, it's a contractual obligation. They are paying us serious money for me to hand out this non-sponsored award, and it goes to Josh Allen. Congratulations! Who's got it better than Josh Allen today? We have to do it every podcast. We did our word of the day. We do our "Who's Got It Better Than."
He's had, admittedly, probably a better month than I've ever had in my entire life.
Probably
All-Pro.
Are you
popped the question to Haley Steinfeld in the AFC Championship game?
Are we going to see Haley Steinfeld and Taylor Swift
next to Caitlin Clark
do a pregame handshake next week?
I don't know.
You got nothing.
I don't have any Haley Steinfeld references to make. I know she was in that Marvel show that didn't seem very good to me.
I think this is the Ravens' Rock Bottom. Doesn't she have that song Rock Bottom?
Possibly. I know she's a singer.
Yeah, that's correct. Let's end with some kind of positive note. How can you're looking at this roster, you're looking at the makeup of this team. What leads you to believe that the Ravens can be back here in a year's time? And what leads you to believe that they could be to finally get over the hump, as we're going to be saying for the next 12 months?
Yeah. I mean, just looking at the depth chart right now, so many important guys are under contract. Lamar, Derek, Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, Justice Hill, Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, Tyler Linderbaum, Daniel Faalele, Roger Rosengarten. That's just the offense. And
Yeah,
on defense,
defense is-
Matt Abike, Travis Jones, Broderick Washington, Dafe Owe, Roquan Smith, Kyle Van Noy is back for another year. Nate Wiggins on a rookie deal. Kyle Hamilton. Darius Washington is a restricted free agent, but I don't think he would cost a whole lot. Marlon Humphrey. I mean, that is a whole heck of a lot of starters. It's a lot more stability than last year's team had going into the offseason. But if you want to play devil's advocate, you can say that, even though we did spend a couple minutes talking about Zay Flowers and the hole that his absence left in this team, the Ravens were probably the healthiest team in the NFL this year. I mean, the Bills certainly were healthier coming into tonight's game, but they had to play without Matt Milano for a chunk of the season, without Terrell Bernard for a chunk of the season, Teron Johnson for a chunk of the season. The Ravens had so many, if not all of their most important pieces available for pretty much all 16 to 17 games. And that is just very, very tough to maintain year over year. I mean, just look at the 49ers. How many important pieces did they bring back from last year's team, and how quickly did it go wrong starting in the preseason with Christian McCaffrey, going into this middle season where Deebo Samuel's not healthy, Trent Williams is banged up. You lose important pieces on that defense, and the team that people have been picking as like a shoe-in to be in the NFC Championship game doesn't even make the playoffs.
I was just curious last night. I was looking at preseason Super Bowl odds because I was thinking, who had the Commanders? Where were they ranked in terms of preseason Super Bowl odds? And they were like 10 spots below the New York Jets. I mean, everybody had the Niners, if not 1-2. They were right back up there. It's kind of scary to think about. I mean, the Niners, biggest difference I think is just Lamar raises the floor of this team so much, and when he plays a full season, the Ravens don't miss the playoffs. That's a caveat, but it's he is worlds better than Brock Purdy, and I think that's the biggest difference. But it is a prime example of just how quickly things can fall apart.
Yeah, and that's why Eric DeCosta has accrued the kind of draft capital that he has, because he knows that it's going to get awfully expensive, awfully quick. Kyle Hamilton is going to require a long-term deal. Tyler Linderbaum is going to require a long-term deal. Travis Jones is going to require a long-term deal. Maybe you try to lock down Darius Washington this offseason before he gets too expensive. Among the guys who you would think would want to stay in Baltimore, Patrick Ricard is not going to come super cheap because he is an all-pro fullback. Ronnie Stanley has, I think, had a great game tonight. Didn't seem like there was a whole lot of pressure off that blind side against a solid enough Bills pass rush, but he went out and proved to a lot of people around the NFL that even with his injury history, even with his age, he's worthy of keeping on a roster and giving a lot of money to. It's funny that you bring up the Commanders, because I think that probably is an unexpected jab in the side of a lot of Ravens fans, that you had this generational team, not generational, but you had this seemingly bulletproof team, and they are knocked out again in the divisional round. Meanwhile, Jaden Daniels on a team that is considerably less talented.
Yeah.
I mean, how many guys on that Commanders depth chart, besides like Terry McLaurin, would start on this Ravens team? And there they are in the NFC Championship game, going into Philly with a real fighting chance to make it to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, in Jaden Daniels' rookie year, I mean, Ravens fans had to wait until Lamar's 6th season for him to reach the AFC Championship game. I do think the NFC is considerably weaker than the AFC this year, and Lamar has had the perpetual bugaboo of Patrick Mahomes, and now throw in Josh Allen in there, and there isn't quite that. There hasn't been quite that in the NFC, but it feels kind of like 2019 when these two cities, when the Washington Nationals made a miraculous run to win the World Series, and the Orioles had just been knocking on the door, and could never get over the hump. And it was like, seriously, this team that cropped up 15 years ago is winning a World Series before we are. And, it feels like you add insult to injury, because the little brothers from down I-95 are able to go farther than you are. And it feels like you had the better team the whole season. You've had the better team for the last 10, 20 years.
Yeah.
And yet you can't do it.
And you lose to a team that you kick the shit out of in week 4.
Yeah. Well, we can't make any more comparisons to the team from 12 years ago, Jonas.
That's true.
That dream is dead. If it were for but a few plays in this game, perhaps we would be singing a different tune and be talking about it's the Ravens Patriots all over again in the AFC Championship game from 2012, 2013.
I was so looking forward to asking Roquan Smith if there was an honorable way to play quarterback and hoping that he would throw some shade upon Patrick Mahomes' way. But I guess we're going to leave that to Buffalo reporters.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for tuning in along all season. Can't even speak at this point. We have a flight in 6 hours to get back to Baltimore, and then we're going to be covering the clean out of the Ravens locker room, and hopefully we'll hear from Mark Andrews. Hopefully we'll hear from a few more Ravens after they've had some time to process.
You think we'll see Marcus Williams?
Excellent question. For perhaps the last time as a Raven. Outstanding question. We won't know. We don't know.
You could have just stopped at we won't.
Great question. Thanks so much for following along all season long, and we're going to keep this podcast going throughout the offseason as well. Obviously, the draft is a big thing coming up. We got the free agency in March. The mini camp, who knows if that's going to exist next year, but we'll cover it. We're going to keep podcasting, and Jonas is going to keep writing on the BaltimoreBanner.com, where you can subscribe $1 for 6 months, along with Gianna Hahn and Kyle Kuhn. They have thoughts, many more thoughts, after the Ravens fall to the Bills 27-25. Write us a good review, and I'll read it out here on the show. I've made that promise before, and I'm going to keep it today because we got a good review from S. Baldwin 2024 2 days ago. 5-star, my go-to Ravens podcast. He said, as a consumer of all the Ravens podcasts I can find, this is my favorite. I live in California and will most likely subscribe to the Banner this week because I want to know everything about this team, and the coverage from this squad is unmatched. Please join Blue Sky, Jonas. We'll drag you there.
I definitely have a lot more time on my hands.
Yeah, you do.
Gonna make my way through some TV, and then maybe Blue Sky.
Perfect time for Succession season 2 to be back. I'll just say that much.
Succession?
Not Succession.
Squid Game?
No, what's it called? Severance.
Oh, okay.
My brain is really too many one word S title excellent shows. It's outstanding. Have you watched Severance?
Yeah, I watched the first season. Maybe Lamar needs an innie and an outie when it comes to the playoffs.
Just switch back and forth. Just snap your fingers. Yeah. Is one winning drive Lumen?
That's a good question.
Who's to say? Thanks so much for tuning in. At Jonas_Shaffer is his handle. I'm at Paul Mancano and at All Banner Sports. And we will be back at some point later this week, I think, to give our final thoughts on the season. For Jonas Shaffer, I'm Paul Mancano. Thanks so much for tuning in.